Hello, my name is Leonardo Campos Yu, and this is my research project for Econ 136. My research was titled Designing a New Way to Match Artists and Venues in Small Gig Live Music Events. So, when we think about concerts and live music, we typically think of Taylor Swift, or for example, Astroworld, the festival hosted by Travis Scott when he was performing, or something like Aftershock, the big metal festival. And so when we think about concerts and live music, we typically think of big shows, very grand, either in open parks or rented out stadiums, and the performers are typically big names. But I started thinking, what about the smaller venues and the smaller musicians, like your local neighborhood band? What about those guys? Do we usually think about concert venues that look like this? Or maybe concert venues that look like this? Typically, we don't. And so when I took my perspective from the larger shows to a smaller, like neighborhood pub show or something that might take place in some other social space where these local musicians are performing, I was wondering, what are the economics of this smaller industry? How do these musicians make money, and how do they get connected with these small venues? What are the logistics in that? So I was looking at some statistics on the larger shows, those that we call worldwide tours, and there's some data here that shows that over the last 10 years, prices for these large show tickets have nearly doubled. And so that might be conducive to the increased profits that a lot of these big name artists like Taylor Swift are making. But that's not the case. When Taylor Swift makes a lot of money because of these rising ticket prices, that's not the case with your small local artist. So in order to understand why that is, I was looking more into, again, taking a lot of inspiration from the large shows and looking at the logistics as to how the large, like the well-known artists like Taylor Swift get matched with large venues. And Live Nation is what's known as a promoter, a company that essentially works as a middleman that connects the artist to the venues. And so the artists are just responsible for producing their music and performing live shows. The venues are the ones, pretty much the places where these performances take place, but the owners of the venues are responsible for maintaining the space, and they make more of their money from selling concessions, selling drinks, snacks, and usually they take a cut of the artist merchandise as well. So, for example, just to reiterate how that works, we have Shoreline Amphitheater here in Mountain View, very close to us. It's actually owned by Live Nation, or rather, Live Nation has a controlling interest in this amphitheater. And so, for instance, one of these bands that I really like, Creed, right here, they're scheduled to perform in August at Shoreline Amphitheater. How did that matching happen? Live Nation contacted both of these, or rather, knew that Creed wanted to perform somewhere in California, and Live Nation set up the arrangement between the band and this available amphitheater that Live Nation is already connected with and has as part of its network. However, that's not the same case with smaller bands. Like, for example, if we take a local band, they're not working with a large corporation like Live Nation. So who does the job of promoting that band and matching the band with some local venue? Typically, bands have a private booking agent, and that's somebody whose job is to be on the phone every day making hundreds of cold calls to the local venues, and pitching them their artist or their band that they work for. And they say, hey, my artist performs this kind of music, they have this amount of experience, they're going to be in the area on this day. Are we able to book a show? And their job is to try to book as many shows for the artists that they work for with local venues. So my analysis involved two models. One, which was intended to simulate the old way of doing things for these small artists and their booking agents, and how these booking agents connect the local venues with the local musicians. I call this the old model because it relies on a very obsolete method of the booking agents having to use word of mouth. Like I mentioned before, they're constantly cold calling. They may, over the span of a few years, accumulate a network of other agents which they're constantly in touch with, and which they might receive updates on availabilities that open up for local venues. But nonetheless, typically how this works is on a first come, first served basis. So for example, the booking agent would call a local venue, and if there's no availability in that venue, they move on to another one until they find a venue that is available and that also matches or has a good fit with the artist that they're working with. And that parallels the exploding offers that we talked about in class. So when they call these venues, usually the venues need to book some show for the upcoming weekend. And so they want to make a decision quickly, either right there on the spot on the phone or within the next few hours or days, but not too much longer than that. So what I did in this analysis was to list out 9 artists and list out 3 venues where they're competing for a spot in. And these artists, via their booking agents, would reach out to the venues according to a list of criteria here. And the logic for this old model follows that exploding offer story. And essentially what happened in my old model here was that artist 1 reached out to venue 1, immediately locked that in because they met all the criteria for the venue. So the venue had a certain genre preference, they had a certain date of availability, and they had a certain minimum expected revenue. And artist 1 was able to fulfill all those needs for the venue. So they were able to lock that in. Same thing for artist 2. They locked in venue 2, and so the remaining venue was venue 3. And we go down to artist 3, and something went wrong there. They didn't match the genre, and they didn't match the availability date. So we move on to artist 4. Artist 4 did not match the expected revenue. They were going to make too little. Artist 5, they didn't match the genre and availability. But then in artist 6, we find, again, a full matching. But since we've already filled up the spots for the 3 venues, that means that artists 7, 8, and 9 don't even get considered. That's a problem because of this first come method for matching. So in this new model, I proposed using a centralized online resource that acted like Live Nation, the centralized promoter, instead of having individual booking agents for all the artists. And what the artists do is they input their information. Once again, it's pretty much the same, except now these data points are not privately held information. They're all inputted into the centralized system where a deferred acceptance algorithm is run in order to find stable, efficient matches with the venues who also input their data. And so what happens here is artists 7, 8, and 9 that were ignored essentially in the last case are now all considered simultaneously when trying to find a match between artist and venue. And so the first and the third match now include artist 9 and artist 8 respectively. Artist 2, that matching stays the same. And so now, by including these later artists that before were not being considered and instead just were ignored, we see that the overall surplus has increased by $780 from the previous $220 because the venues are actually earning more and the artists are reducing their losses. So the conclusion is the individual booking agent method is very tedious and a manual process that, because of error by part of the human booking agent, will result in suboptimal, inefficient matches, whereas an online resource that uses the deferred acceptance algorithm will actually solve that problem, making for an automatic, efficient, and optimal system. Thank you.